Hey everyone, Tracy here with Not Afraid of Color, doing another video for Technique Junkies for the April 2022 release. And here is a picture of the first card I did, and I'm going to show you how I did it. So I've got two stamp sets from the April release, and I am going to make a similar sky. They never come out exactly the same, but the first one I'm using is the size matters inside and out. Let me just zoom out a little, and I'm just going to let you read these. And then I'll move right along. But I want you to be able to read those for yourself. They're pretty funny. I like the yard sale one. And then I've got this stamp, which is kind of a border stamp in the Meadow. It's S960. We're going to be using both of those. What I have here is I have a piece of watercolor cardstock, and it's about 5.5 by 5, something like that. And I'm going to be using one of my Altenew blender brushes, the bigger one, to lay color down onto this. You don't have to use that. You can use what you have. Okay, you can use a finger blender or a blending brush or your finger, whatever. And what I'm doing is I'm just cleaning the dark color off of there because I go from light to dark. I use it for every color. I did break down and buy those waffle flower ones. Yeah, somebody got me. I forget who it was. I think it was Nicole Spohr. Anyway, I'm going to start out by adding just random spots of sponge sugar. So that's going to be my lightest color. And I am truly going randomly here. Because, you know, your morning pink sky is never just some perfect thing. It's always got weird stuff in it. And this could be a sunrise, it could be a sunset, whatever you want. Of course, the darkest part will be at the bottom, so I'm keeping it lighter towards the top, and I'll darken it down towards the bottom. So I didn't do any sponge sugar clouds really on the bottom. So next I'll be going in with some saltwater taffy, and I'm using all oxides here. And I'm going to go ahead and speed up this color blending process because it's pretty repetitive. I'm just adding the color in again pretty randomly, but I'm going again from light to dark. So I don't have to clean off my brush because, yeah. So I'm getting more saltwater taffy towards the bottom because I want the bottom kind of dark. And then I'm going to go in with the picked raspberry and lay down color in random spots, kind of below the clouds that I had before. And I'm going to leave a little bit of space for blue, but I don't want a lot of blue in there. All right, so we've got our picked raspberry down. Now we're going to go in with the dried marigold. So I'm kind of going back and forth between oranges and pinks. And just adding down the dried marigold in random spots. Okay, and then next I'll go in with some ripe persimmon because I want some really deep orange in here. And you can do a couple of layers. You can go as light or as intense as you want. I tend to go for intense colors, so that's what you see me doing here. But by the time you do the final step, and by the way, this is candied apple, it does lighten up quite a bit. And you see I'm putting the darker colors towards the bottom. Now I am cleaning off my brush because I'm going to go in with some salvage patina and just add a little bit of blue. Just in the white spots, and see my brush wasn't quite clean enough, but that's okay. You could use a different brush if you wanted to. And you see where I'm just kind of adding little tidbits of blue going over the pink. So I'm trying not to go over the oranges too much. And now I'm just going to take my water sprayer. Water sprayer, where are you? There you are. And I am going to soak this thing. Because remember, we used watercolor paper. And that's going to make all these inks kind of blend in together. And I'm just going to kind of rock it back and forth. And you see there at the bottom, I do not want that. So I'll add more water. I don't want that that kind of look. So I'm just kind of rocking it back and forth, getting those colors to blend, and you can see that it lightened them down quite a bit. And I'm just tapping off the excess water. And I'll grab a towel here and kind of clean that up. Then I'm going to lay that down and I'm going to hit it with my heat tool. Yeah, my cord is tangled again. I really need to find a better situation for this. I'm just going to go ahead and heat that up and get it dry. Okay, and I went ahead and sped this up again because nobody wants to watch paint dry. But I'm going to get it as dry as I can. I don't need it to be 100% dry because I'm going to be going in with another layer because I want more intensity of color. So I'm going to go back in with some more intense color here. So I'm going to go back in with the picked raspberry, and then I am kind of just painting little swirls of little clouds, and I'll be, putting water on this again, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't go down perfectly. I just lost some of my color there and I want it back. I want it back. So I'll go in with a little bit more of the saltwater taffy. And then I'll go in a little bit more with the ripe persimmon. Or spice marmalade. Oh, my bad. Got that wrong. Fix it. And I'm going to wet it down again and let those colors kind of blend together. And I'm going to hold down one side because I don't want it arching up too much, because that's where you end up losing a lot of your color when it arches up like that, and then you have to water it down to get it to lay still. So I'm just going to get this nice and dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. Which is going to be, we're going to need to trim this down some. So I'll just tap off the edges here because I'm going to be cutting those off. I want to trim this down to 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm just going to wipe that off so I don't have any excess water here, and I'm going to get out my trimmer. And go ahead and trim that down to 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm going to trim off that spot where I have a water stain because I don't want water stains on here. And I'm not worried about that one dark spot because my little scenery is going to cover it. And I'm just going to trim this down to 5 1/4. There we go. Pick up my scraps. And just kind of work with the paper to get it to kind of straighten out a little bit. Yeah, I'm not necessarily worried about that dark portion because I'm going to be stamping over it. So I'm going to get out my little Meadow stamp here, and I'm going to get out my stamping platform, and I'm going to stamp that down. Now you could heat emboss it if you wanted to. I'm not going to. I want to keep this card fairly simple and just let it stand for itself. So I'll just take the backing off this stamp, and I'm going to lay this here in my stamp platform. I am going to put a little magnet on the top because I know I'm going to need to stamp multiple times. It's just the nature of using rubber stamps that are bigger. Like smaller stamps, they don't fight you, but the bigger ones, the bigger the stamp, the more it wants to go on too light. So I'm going to stamp this 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 times, however many times it takes to get it as dark as I want it. All right, here we go. There's one. And I will use my little pressure tool here just to kind of help get even pressure, but it's too light for me. I need to go darker. And you could use Catherine Puller ink. I found with Catherine Puller ink, the black ink, it does tend to bleed a little bit, and the VersaFine Clair does not bleed. So that's why it's my preferred ink. Now, I also like to use the archival inks, the Tim Holtz archival and the Black Soot or the Jet Black archival. But for this, I'm just sticking here with this particular ink. And I've got it as dark as I need it to be, so let me just move my stamping platform here. I'm going to lay this down, and now I'm going to create a vignette here around the edges, and I'm going to do a pretty heavy vignette, and probably a little heavier than I meant to, but I'll show you how to fix that. Because the ink that I'm using, this is Lavinia ink in Mulberry, and I'm going to put a paper towel here so I can dab off. But if you get a little heavy-handed, and I tend to do that, you can correct it because this is water-based ink and it is water reactive. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag color in. And you could do any color you want. You could skip this step, but it definitely brings some intensity to what you're trying to do. But the lighter the color, you know, the less intense it's going to be. And you can see there where I got a little heavy. Didn't dab off, and yeah. I mean, it's still pretty, but it's not the look I'm looking for. So I'm going to show you how we fix that when I'm done doing all the edges here. And I'm bringing some of that color down into the sky. And then I'll go ahead and do the sides and bottom. And I don't mind if it's really intense at the bottom or the sides. Honestly, I like it. But I don't want it to look, you know, scratchy, I guess. So when you're using a brush to brush it in, you get those little brush marks. Don't want that. But this color goes so well with all the oranges and yellows and pinks. Just like a sunset would look. So you see I'm starting from my mat and swiping upward. And then just kind of blending it down. And I want that bottom part to be the most intense. Okay. Get this side done, and I'll show you how we're going to correct some of that darkness. I'm just kind of blend out towards the center. One thing about the Lavinia ink, it dries fairly fast, so you've got to blend quickly. Let me go ahead and wipe off my mat here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I've got my paper towel, and I'm just going to spray some water on it, and I'm going to start blotting. And you see as I blot, it helps blend that color in and lighten it up. So I move my paper towel around so that I'm not putting color back down. And I'm just going to blot all those deep dark areas until they are kind of blended in and lightened up. And it looks like just a dark purple cloud coming down. Because when you're blotting with the paper towel, you're also bringing color, moving the color around. And just do as much or as little as you want. Just to kind of de-intensify any mistakes you made, or even just create, you know, more visual interest. Okay, I'm good with that. Now I want to bring a little color back into here because I still don't have as much orange as I want. So I am going to first dry this off a bit because I did get it wet while I was blotting it. I'm not, you know, drying it crispy or anything, just drying it enough to where I can, you know, put some color down without it kind of dragging, because I'm going to go in with a much, much lighter hand. And I do flip it over and work on the back side just to help kind of straighten it out, because that's kind of the nature of watercolor paper, is it'll bend back and forth. Reminds me of a taco shell. Speaking of tacos. Now I'm hungry. See what you guys did? All right, so I'm just kind of straightening my paper here. This is, I want to say this is my B brand watercolor paper that I buy from Walmart for like 50 sheets for like 10 bucks or something like that. So I'm going to come grab this spice marmalade again because I want more orange, and I'm real super light-handed. Super light, like barely even touching the brush down. Putting some color back in. I really do love these blending brushes. I think they're amazing. And I'm just kind of blending that color out, not grabbing any more color, just blending it out. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab some of the picked raspberry as well. Or not. I thought I was. I'm going to go ahead and stamp it. So I've got the Size Matters Inside Out stamps, and I'm going to be using the Follow Your Heart, Take Your Brain With You stamps. And you'll see what I'm talking about when I put this in my stamping platform. Because it's a smaller stamp, the pressure that I put on it is fine. I don't even really need to stamp it twice. But I'm going to go ahead and lay my magnet on here, and I do want to use my piece of acetate so that I can get the placement just right on the stamp and make sure it's not crooked or upside down or whatever, because it's hard to read them when they're backwards. So I like to test them out on acetate first, and I just use some VersaFine Clear on there, and I only just tap it a little bit. I don't need a bunch of intense heavy ink on there because I'm just doing placement. And I'm looking at it, and to me the follow is a little bit low, so I'm going to just lift it up a little bit and leave it on the stamp platform. I'm going to wipe off my first stamp. I'm not even going to put any more ink on here. I'm just going to lay it here and test its placement. And I'm good with that. So I'm going to take off my piece of acetate. And I'll leave my magnet on there, no big deal. Wipe my acetate off. And again, with the VersaFine Clear, I'm just going to stamp Follow Your Heart. I love this font. It's such a pretty font. Okay, here we go. See, one was probably good enough, but I'm just doing one more for good measure, since I am doing it on watercolor paper that has a little bit of texture, even though I'm working on the smooth side. There we go, perfect. All right, so we need to set that aside because I need to do the inside, because remember, these are inside out sentiments. So I'm going to take just a piece of 80-pound accent opaque cardstock. And remember that I'm working in landscape mode. Think about it. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and just lay this down in my stamping platform. And I'm again going to magnet down my little piece of acetate. And because I want to get that pretty much in the middle. I am going to be trimming this down to 3 3/4 by 5, but I still kind of want to make sure I get this in the middle, so I trim all the sides properly. So let's check placement. Are we good? We're good. Yes. Excellent. Nice aim. I get better at this as I go. Gonna go ahead and just lay my magnet down so I don't lose my piece of acetate, because I lose it all the time. I'm going to stamp that down, not too much pressure. I don't want to smoosh it, just a little bit of pressure. And it's perfect the first time. Love it. And right in the center too. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off my stamp. I'm going to pull this out of the stamping platform and get it ready for trimming. And then you can write in the rest of whatever sentiment you want. So let's go ahead and trim this down to 4, actually 3 3/4 by 5. Because I'm going to be attaching it to the inside of the card. I'm going to use, the card base is going to be a craft card base. So I could have stamped directly into it, but I like the white, and this is a very smooth paper. So, you know, when somebody wants to write on it, they're not fighting with the kind of bumpiness of a craft cardstock. So I'm grabbing a card base here. And I do want to, before I do anything, I want to clean off my mat again in case there's any ink, because I am working with a white piece of paper that I would rather not get dirty. I would rather not. So I'm just making sure this is good and clean, because I'm going to be putting tape runner on there to stick it to the inside of the card. And this is, I want to say this is my scrapbook.com tape runner. I don't know. I never pay attention to the label. I'm just going to put some tape around the edges and one down the middle. I don't need a bunch. And just make sure that I get my placement pretty even. There we go. Perfect. Now I can glue this piece down to the craft. Pretty much it's pretty easy card to do. I mean, the stamps do the work for you here. So I'm just going to use my reptile glue and glue it all around the edges and then some in the middle. Quite a bit for this particular card because of the bumpy nature of the back of the watercolor cardstock. And I'm going to just set that on there nice and even, and then I'm going to put something flat here to let it dry flat. Make sure that all the glue adheres. There we go, a little bit heavy. It just doesn't take very long at all. So once that's glued down, this card is finished. So thank you again for coming to see me here and watching my Technique Junkies video. I do have a discount code. It is TJ10Color. We use today in the Meadow, and we use the Inside Out Sentiments Size Matters, both from the April 2022 Technique Junkies release. Now, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, all right? Appreciate it. And take care, y'all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.